license referrals. So we have, this is for Oak Bay Beach Hotel and the Snug Pub. Mr. Green, I believe you're just doing a brief introduction to explain our options.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. The district has received 2 liquor license referrals associated with the Oak Bay Beach Hotel. The applicant has applied to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, LCRB, to extend the hours of liquor service for both the food primary license associated with the Oak Bay Beach Hotel and the liquor primary license associated with the Snug Pub. These 2 applications have been referred to the district for review and a response by the LCRB. And staff are recommending that council direct staff to provide an opt-out of comment response to those 2 applications. The applicant, I believe, is also here in case council has any questions on the application. Susan?
Sure.
Anybody? Susan? No? She said she was going to attend. She was invited, but...
Maybe online if there, but I will, I'll bring it back to this table to see if there are any questions. This is a pretty normal process if, unless something is unusual to just opt. But are there any questions for members of council to staff? Then I will turn to members of the public. This is an option item for public input. If anybody wishes to speak to us about this referral, I'm happy to take any public comment. That can be online or in person. I'm just going to remind, I don't anticipate a wave of hands on this one, but for items that do have public input, if you're watching online, you can call the 855 number and hit *9. It's that information, or attend the Zoom call and join these meetings and attend in that way if anybody wishes. I don't see hands popping up to speak to this item, so I'm going to ask for a motion to start with move receipt of the report. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And I'll move the 2 staff recommendations.
Thank you. Just opt out of both. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. See, they give me the easy ones and Councillor Appleton the hard ones. Moving to section 5.1. This is the official. These are. This section is not subject to public input. We have had a public hearing on this matter, and it's back in front of council now for consideration. We have proposed bylaws here in front of us, and I'm going to hand this just over to, is it Mr. Green or Mr. Bowl to give a brief introduction? I assume.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff don't have any further information. Obviously, council held a public hearing on October the 8th. The bylaws are on for consideration, both the 2 bylaws, an amendment to the OCP for 3rd and final, as well as a zoning bylaw for 3rd and final. Happy to answer any questions that council may have on the proposed bylaws.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask one quick question. Just, are these contingent upon each other, i.e. they're in the order of approving the OCP changes and then the zoning changes, but they can go in that order, correct? If there's any changes to the zoning, it wouldn't affect the OCP pieces?
Correct. My only advice would be a council needs to adopt the OCP amendment first in advance of the zoning bylaw, and they could be, obviously you could give 3rd and final to the OCP and then refer the zoning bylaw for further information, or
okay.
Yeah, they are independent of each other.
Thank you for that. Do we have questions from members of council to staff? Go ahead, or the applicant. The applicants are here as well, so go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks, Mayor. And actually, my question is around an amendment that I would like to put forward, and I'm just wondering, and it would be on the zoning bylaw. So I'm wondering...
Why don't you just state what it is you would like to achieve, and we can talk to staff about how that might be done.
What I'd like to achieve is that I would like that any development on the parking lot would require a separate development application and council approval with public consultation before being able to move forward. So right now, the whole parking lot, if we move forward with this tonight, can be built on without anything coming back to council, and it can be built on up to 30 meters, I believe, at any position within the parking lot. And so what I would like to do is I'd like to protect the parking lot and the residents a little bit, and in that I'd like to propose that we would amend that so that it would have to come back to council. Any proposal in the future would have to come back to council for approval.
Thank you. And there was a question along these lines, I know, that was circulated to staff, I think from Councillor Smart earlier today as well, just as a curiosity of of what controls there are or could be within that. So I'm not clear whether that's a question on the OCP piece or if it's a question on the zoning portion, but perhaps I'll hand that over to staff. Mr. Green?
Through your worship, I'll make a start and try to answer that question. Obviously, there is no ability for the district to introduce or implement a DPA for institutional buildings under the Local Government Act. And so council couldn't
I don't think that's actually obvious. I'm not sure that we knew that. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And so, there isn't any ability for the district to introduce a DPA for institutional type buildings. Obviously, we do have a clause in the OCP that talks about where institutional establishments are wanted to do multi-unit residential buildings, then they are subject to the multi-unit residential form and character guidelines in the OCP. And so that, but in this case, as mentioned in the staff report that went to council on September the 8th, this is not, in the opinion of staff, a multi-unit residential building, given that it's not subject to the Residential Tenancy Act and therefore is an institutional building. And that's why we then require the applicant to amend the OCP as part of this application, as well as a zoning application. Obviously, if council wishes to control height setbacks, then obviously council has that ability through its zoning bylaw to control height, setback, density, lot coverage, etc. But I don't, and therefore, if there is a certain height limit and the applicant needs to amend the height limit, then they would need to go through that development variance permit process. Does that, hopefully that answers the question?
Mr. Bull?
Thank you, and maybe I'll add to that. So one of the specific options that council would have, if in response to Councillor Braithwaite's question, is to change the zoning bylaw to limit the approval to the building only. But that's quite complex. That's not what the current bylaw is outlining, but that's what it comes down to if that's the desire of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. And I'm going to make another piece of this as well. That I know that there's mention in the report of things like setting FSR and things like that for the area as a whole. Those are not included as they are. Essentially, it gives the guidelines of maximum of 30% lot coverage, but essentially allows the campus design to happen within that framework. Is that correct?
Yes, correct, Your Worship. Yeah, just in as of today, obviously the college has, that land is currently zone P1. There is a height limit of 14 metres, and so they can build up to 14 metres straight to a building permit as of today.
That's helpful to know as well. Thank you, Mr. Green. Councillor Braithwaite?
I need to digest that, so maybe someone else would like to say something.
That's fine. We're taking questions at this point anyway, so happy to take any additional questions from members of council. I have a question of sort of a similar, not a different item, but was just around the question of the height, the roof height limit in the zoning is. The zoning is higher than the roof height of the building being asked for, and I understand that gives more flexibility. What would be the process if we wanted to change the zoning to essentially match the current roof height, so that there would be, this building could go forward, but as you mentioned that if future buildings wanted to go higher than that, they would have to go through a variance process. Mr. Green?
Yes, so the text amendment to the P1 zone that the applicant applied for and that we've drafted for council has a maximum permitted roof height of 30 metres, and that was to allow some flexibility of roof height in relation to institutional buildings, which generally have a higher floor plate than residential buildings in a 6-storey form. However, council, the building that has currently been presented by Camosun has a roof height of 24.0 metres, and so if council wanted to reduce the maximum permitted roof height from 30 metres to say 25 metres, given that the drawings that we've received as part of the rezoning application are not building permit drawings, and therefore it would be advisable to provide a little bit of wiggle room and flexibility for, say, the mechanical room needs to be bigger slightly, and so we would, I guess, council has that ability to reduce the overall height of the roof height from 30 metres down to 25 metres, and so that bylaw could be amended. However, it should be noted that obviously the Local Government Act has some specific language when council can alter a bylaw following public hearing that council needs to be aware of, and so council can only alter or decrease the density in a zoning bylaw after public hearing with the express or explicit consent of the property owner and applicant. So if council did so choose to seek an amendment to the zoning bylaw, we would essentially we would probably recommend that you postpone third and final reading to get consent from Camosun College, and then bring back the bylaw for consideration of third reading with that amendment to reduce the maximum permitted roof height from 30 metres to 25 metres.
Okay, thank you. So procedurally, OCP could go forward,
Correct.
and it would be a referral motion, refer the matter back to staff to seek that consent.
And then we will bring that bylaw back to the next available council agenda.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for members of staff with the applicant? Councillor Braithwaite?
Thanks. So I just want to clarify then. So did I hear you say that the amendment that I want to make is not possible to make based on what is written in the bylaw right now?
Go ahead.
If you wish, yeah, correct. That's my understanding. However, if council wanted to, we'd probably need to get some further legal advice. If that was the wish of council to explore that further, we would need that to be referred back to staff to enable the district to speak to our legal counsel on how that could be achieved through either amending the zoning bylaw, which I don't believe we have, or amending the covenants that we are currently drafting with the applicant to address certain issues.
Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. And so if we did elect to do what the Mayor has been talking about, which is to reduce the building height to 25 metres, that would then stop us from putting forward the zoning bylaw, which would then allow us to perhaps look at my amendments as well at the same time.
Mr. Green?
For your worship, I believe that would be the case, yes.
Okay. I don't see any other questions of members of council. I'm going to perhaps suggest that we put the official community plan third reading on the floor, and then we can have a debate.
I'll move that the official community plan bylaw number 4620/2014, amendment bylaw number 4925/2025 be read a third time.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Don't see any discussion. I will speak very briefly that I appreciate the language that was ultimately came to and has gone through public hearing. I think we had nobody speaking against the language of the OCP. I think it captured the intent of these changes and provided a reasonable flexibility of intent and clarification. So appreciate the work done by staff and the applicants on this one. Not seeing any other speaker, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Third reading passes. No, none opposed.
And I'll move that the official community plan bylaw number 4620/2014, amendment bylaw number 4925/2025 be adopted.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. We don't usually debate on adoption. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Just for my clarification of procedure here, would we read third reading in if we wanted to make an amendment, or would we just refer, if we have a motion to refer the matter back to consider that?
Through your worship, yeah, we would recommend that you refer it back to staff to get the explicit consent of Camosun College, and then we would bring that bylaw back for a third reading and amendment at next subsequent council meeting.
Okay. That's just if that's the will of council. I think that was just one of the things that came up in the conversation, both before the public hearing and then some of the concerns in the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
So my understanding of this motion I have would be that to refer this matter back to staff to seek the explicit consent of the Camosun College to amend that's the bylaw text amendment, correct, to the P1 general institutional zone. That would reduce the maximum permitted roof height. Just want to make sure I'm getting that right. Roof height for buildings and structures from 30 meters to 25 meters. That would be in alignment with slightly more than the current building, but that gives some wiggle room for them. Okay, is that your motion?
Correct.
Yes, and then I'm wondering if that it can also include,
I'm going to, I
we're
think
gonna
we
do
have
it
to be
separate,
separate. Yeah,
okay.
so is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. I just want to make sure I'm clear about the process here, because I wouldn't mind hearing from Camosun College if they have any concerns with this or anything else, but are we able to ask those questions at this point in the thing, or should we refer it back to staff to have that conversation?
You could absolutely ask that question, is my understanding, unless...
Mr. Bull?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, or yeah, in response to your question, we are currently after public hearing, so there are limits to new information we can consider. So maybe Ms. Anderson can further elaborate or explain what is or is not in scope of this meeting tonight. Thank you.
No, thank you through the mayor. I would agree with Mr. Boole that any additional information that council receives is a risk. So this, as it's written, referring it back to staff and they can explore it, but hearing from the applicant might pose a risk.
Fair. Okay. Thank you for that. Always good to be careful in these matters. Councillor Smart?
Thank you. I appreciate the amendment, but I won't be supporting it. We have the limit already in place of 6 stories, and I feel comfortable with the 6 stories and the reasoning behind having the height to include such things as mechanical units, slope and grade. It's a buffer. Yeah, so I don't feel a need to manage this moment more carefully. I'm comfortable with just the fact that we've limited it to 6 stories.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Similarly, I would not support the option to refer. I think we need to balance responding to, sort of managing the scale of buildings with also providing the options to Camosun College. I think this is a really important area of growth for the college, and I think that there's some potentially very significant institutional buildings that the campus and the surrounding community could really benefit from. So I would be reticent to have that move forward, although I am somewhat comforted by the language that there would be explicit permission required from Camosun College. So in the event that it does go forward, I'm somewhat comforted by that language. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Procedurally here, I got a seconder for this motion. I know I got the motion. I did, okay. Who was it seconded? Well, you moved the motion. Was there a seconder? Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I have it on the floor before we start debating it. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I don't support this motion. I think that, as Councillor Smart has said, we have a stories limit, and I do believe that at one point in the discussion, we have heard that in designing future institutional buildings, that higher floor plates may be necessary for functionality. And so by setting a limit here, we're going to limit what actually can be done in terms of what the needs might be. And I honestly don't think that 5 meters is very much. And it's kind of I feel it's kind of getting into the weeds. So I don't think it's necessary or advisable at all, actually. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Other discussion? I'll speak briefly to the motion. I'm speaking in support. I think it for 2 reasons. One, I think the roof right here sort of indicates sort of the intended sort of height of that area. 15 feet is pretty, or 17 feet is pretty substantial, particularly if we're giving the relatively small setbacks from the street and the north properties. I think I'm comfortable with that, but I think if this is not terribly, in my mind, not terribly restrictive in the sense that if there is a specific building that has the need for the extra height, it would just be a variance application, not a rezoning or other need. So for those reasons, I think this is a good approach. And certainly I think the point made by Councillor Appleton that this is essentially going back to for staff to talk to Camosun College and understand what the implications of that would be. Comforts me just to understand what would come back. The direction here is to go and seek that consent of Camosun College on this. To my mind, it's a reasonable piece, because that 15 feet or 17 feet difference can create quite a difference, particularly at the edges of the property. So I'm supportive of this, although I do hope that I think it can be done fairly quickly. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, Mayor, thank you for those comments. Could we just have clarification on what you presented, if staff could just enlighten us to how this would move along. I mean, we have been trying to expedite this whole process, and I don't want it to be stalled.
Sure. Mr. Green, if this passes and goes back to staff, this is what would be the time frame for that conversation to happen and those text amendments to be brought back to council?
Through your worship, obviously we would expedite that as quickly as possible and hopefully get the bylaws back to council for consideration next Monday, the 27th.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson. Any other discussion? So the motion right now is to refer that. So the community plan changes have been adopted. So this is the motion on the floor is to refer this portion back. The zoning bylaw, second reading for discussion with Camosun. Don't see other conversations, so I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? I have Councillor Watson, Appleton, Smart opposed. That does carry. So we'll expect that back here on Monday. Councillor Braithwaite, did you have a motion?
Yeah, I would like to move that the current amendments apply only to the areas in the current development proposal, and any development on the remainder of the parking lot would require a separate development application and council approval with public consultation before moving forward.
So I'm not sure that's a valid motion as it stands. I'm trying to, we're post-public hearing, we have a piece here. I just want to make sure that we're giving direction to staff in a way that is compliant with the changes that we can make. And we can decline the application.
I don't want to decline the application.
So I'm going to let staff mull and debate what options might come forward out of that.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I'm wondering if the intent here is to support the proposed changes in the bylaw, but limit them only to the proposed building and let the remainder of the site be dealt with later. That's a change, a more substantial change to the zoning bylaw that would need to be included and amended in the zoning bylaw. A little bit more complex to do, probably takes a bit more time. And I'm not sure where the applicant's role is there. Mr. Green, is that consent as well?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That would need the explicit consent of the owner to, and also likely some more major change to the text amendment to that P1 zone, or through some kind of covenant to enable the ability to see developments on the remainder of the site, or to increase, go beyond what is currently permitted in that zone.
So the only other thing I can think, Councillor Braithwaite, and I'm sorry because I hadn't thought through this piece beforehand. There are aspects of the text amendments to the bylaw that lay out kind of how this is being guided, right? In terms of the lot coverage of buildings, the need to kind of be, fit within a university or college campus model, and buildings would only be approved within that framework. So are there maybe some aspects of that like the lot coverage or other aspects you think that might ameliorate your concerns about the density of the proposed zone?
Yeah, I think I just want to ensure that council retains input on any future changes on the campus. I mean, I think that if we can have that, then I'm comfortable moving forward with it. But I think that's where a lot of the residents' concerns came to us, was that what is going to happen on the rest of that site. I don't think Camosun necessarily wants to build on the rest of that site, but if perhaps they did and they wanted to put another 6 or 7 story building on the site closer to the residents, then I would like to be able to have the council of the day be able to have input into that, and the public to have input into that.
All I can suggest is perhaps you're looking at that through setbacks. That's about the only aspect I can think that would. But Mr. Green, I see you reaching for a button, so.
I was just on to add, obviously, Camosun College are a responsible agency and institution in the community, and therefore, council could encourage Camosun College on any future proposals, and there could even be wording in the in the forthcoming OCP update that encourages those community institutions to engage with their neighbours when undertaking development proposals of this scale and nature.
Councillor Braithwaite? Okay. I am, so right now that motion is, oh, no, it passed already, so I don't see other motions on the floor at this point on this item, so that'll come back to council likely next week after the discussion with Camosun College. Thank you very much for being here this evening. Halfway there through the OCP, hopefully a couple of minor changes or explanations of why that wouldn't happen that will come back to this table next week. Thank you. You've learned all about short-term rentals in your time here this evening. Item number 5.2 is, unless there's anything else on that agenda item, just want to make sure for staff know. Amenity and Development Cost Charge Reverse Fund Establishment Bylaws. We've had first, second, third reading. They're back here for adoption. Go ahead.
Your Worship, I would move that Amenity Cost Charges Reserve Fund Bylaw number 4934, 2025 be adopted.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed?
I would further move, Your Worship, that Development Cost Charges Reserve Funds Bylaw number 4935, 2025 be adopted.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? Thank you. Moving to 5.3. We have a report for the Official Community Plan Amendment, OCP 0009, Zoning Amendment Bylaw ZON 00054, and Development Permit 53 at 42298 Lansdowne Road. This process follows the same as the other ones. I know there's lots of people here interested in this land use item. Procedurally, because of the complexity of the proposed changes, I just get this up front. This is the first time council had a chance to see this application. I know there's been a lot of community interest in it and discussions with the developer. It's the first time in front of us. So at this point, council has a first chance to look at it, provide feedback. Should council has options to send it back to approve it or approve it to go forward for consideration at a public hearing where we would seek public input, send it back to staff with changes, or decline it. Those are essentially the three options in front of us tonight. There is not public input on it at this time because it will have an opportunity for public hearing at such time as council feels it has enough merit to go to public input. So at this point, we're here just to kind of have a first look, give some direction, and then it will go to public hearing at some point in future should council give that direction. So just for people's interest here, this is a good chance, good meeting to be at, a good one to watch the discussion, but not an opportunity. We're not delving yet into the details from the public at this point. So welcome, and over to you, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Your Worship. The district has received applications to amend the official community plan, amend the zoning bylaw, and a multi-unit residential development permit for the property located at 2298 Lansdowne Road. The purpose of these three applications is to facilitate the development of a 13-unit strata townhouse project. The OCP amendments and zoning amendment applications were reviewed by the Advisory Planning Commission on March 19th of this year, and the development permit was also reviewed by the Advisory Design Panel on May 13th of this year. Staff are recommending that the application be referred back to staff to work with the applicant to address the issues listed in the staff recommendation. The applicant is also here to answer any questions that council may have on the application, and they do have a presentation that they would like to present to council to summarise the application. That was also included in council's agenda package, and therefore at the discretion of the chair, if you wish to receive that presentation, the applicants would like to provide that to you.
Yes. No, absolutely welcome the presentation. We don't do presentations at public hearings, so this is a good opportunity for us to get the feeling of what it is that's being proposed and ask questions. So this is where the meat and potatoes works begins. So Mr. Holland, can you just state your name and for the record?
Thank you, Your Worship. Council, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Mark Holland. I live in Saanich, and I'm here to just give you a brief presentation here the first time we're coming to you with this proposal. I'm part of a team. We're here. We've got our architect and landscape architect online, and the owner is here with us as well to answer any questions that would come up in this process. I'll just hit a few key highlights of the facts of the proposal at this point, and then I'd like to shift most of the conversation to the issues that have been raised during community engagement to walk you through sort of what those issues are and the facts around those. the first thing that I'd like to speak about is the context, the site itself and its context in brief. This is a unique site. It's on Lansdowne, a very busy street. It's immediately adjacent one of the largest open spaces in Oak Bay in the Uplands golf course. It's within walking distance of some of the most we need to see this as a site. It's in a neighborhood, but it's in the northwest side of Oak Bay, and as such, it's within walking distance or a short cycling, scooter, active transportation distance of the region's two largest post-secondary educational institutes, and this type of housing is targeted at staff, faculty, and rentals for those kinds of students. It's within walking distance of one of the largest retail centers in the entire region in the form of Hillside Mall, as well as local retail and service areas. And it's within a short walking distance of major transit routes, including 15-minute headways, north, south, east, west. It's an excellent location as part of the larger context in this process. The project provides just a few key points on the project itself. So 13 homes over 2 buildings, 2 to 3 bedrooms per townhouse. There's 17 parking stalls, a parking ratio of 1.3. There are 3 visitor spaces outside on the surface, including one that's accessible. There are 6 bicycle visitor stalls, including 4 that can handle cargo bikes. We have a 58% open space and a 43% canopy coverage projection for the building itself and the complex. And we're planting significantly more trees than are there now. To that point, I'll draw your attention to the photo here in the Google image here in the lower left. The site is kind of unique in the neighborhood. It has very, very few trees on it. While there is a count of close to a dozen in the area, they're not really in the middle of the site. So most of the greenery you see on this site is essentially shrubs. They're very mature because the building itself is about 75 years old. So they've been there a long time, but we have one Gary oak tree on the site that's sort of in the middle, and I'll speak to that here in a moment. There's a lot of policy alignment here, and I won't go into a whole lot of it. Where's my policy alignment slide? We're looking at housing diversity in this primarily single-family neighborhood. We're looking at 3-story levels infill, supporting active transportation, significantly increasing the trees and the coverage, the canopy coverage, public realm benefits, and more. In terms of the community engagement, shortly after the application was submitted, a site walk was organized by the neighborhood, and at this point I'd just like to put a shout out to Leona Fournette, who lives a few doors down. She's been fantastic to work with, very civil, very respectful, and very engaged in the community. We've had the benefit of her, the community and ourselves have had the benefit of the effort and a lot of time that she's put into this to make sure this was a comprehensive conversation. We held a walk around that she helped organize with about 40 neighbors, a little more than that. So we walked around the site with them, heard and discussed what the issues were and how folks perceived it. We held an open house at a nearby church a few months later. We had about 130 people there. We had a notification through Canada Post of about 350-meter radius of the site. We were let down by Canada Post, and we've apologized for this. Some folks did not get even though there was weeks of lead time, some folks didn't get their notice until the day of. So as I'd mentioned with the Lansdowne discussion, we learned our lesson. We hand deliver everything now in that particular area. We've heard, you received a report on the results of that engagement, and there's been a lot of ongoing discussion again since with neighbors in the area. There's about 5 things that have come up in those discussions that I'd like to raise here now and just speak specifically to here in the last and final part of my conversation. The first one was concerns about the change in the neighborhood context. This is not a new conversation that you're experiencing. The context of this area of Oak Bay, as you well know, most of it was constructed in the 1950s. There are a few buildings in the area that were 1970s, 1980s, but the significant majority are 1950s. And obviously the whole area was developed around that time. This puts those buildings at 70 to 80 years old, and as such, a lot of them are going through pretty significant changes now. Renovations, and the ones that aren't definitely show their age. Full expensive renovations, and in many cases, the houses are being pulled down and new ones are put up. In those cases, we see, as you can see, a few images here, just a small sampling. We obviously weren't going to show images of all of the streets in the area. We're seeing a lot of 2-story, we're seeing flat roofs, we're seeing heritage-inspired buildings with gable roofs instead of the classic 1 to 1.5 story low hip roof of the 1950s. So we're seeing this is a neighborhood in flux simply because it's old. Just at that key point where it's not a heritage neighborhood where one would protect a whole lot of 1910s, 1920s buildings, but the buildings now require very significant input of resources and money. So the design that was proposed for this, recognizing that we were moving from this 1950s 1.5-story basis into a slightly more urban area, pulled on the archetype of row homes. So there's 2 buildings here of row homes. We chose to go with the peaked roof, which is a much more common character pattern within Oak Bay. However, the architect and the owner wanted to pursue a slightly more contemporary expression of what is a classic archetype. And so they're proposing a slightly updated version of this. There's not as much massing. There's high quality materials. We're looking at brick cladding here, expensive window systems. They moved all of the garages into the back, into the central courtyard, so they're not visible from any of the surrounding areas. And otherwise we have, modern, contemporary, efficient buildings here. The landscape likewise has come forward with the more contemporary approaches. We're dealing with a significant percentage of native and drought tolerant plants in the proposed design, also adding an additional layer of trees around for privacy, which I'll speak about in a moment. I think one of the benefits that the owner and the project is proposing for the community, there's a fairly well-used pathway immediately adjacent this property between it and the uplands. Many of you may have walked on it if you've gone walking around the uplands golf course. It is in very poor shape. It's a kind of a single layer of small asphalt. It's quite bumpy, and there's nothing around it. Recognizing that this is kind of the immediate area, the project is proposing to update that pathway and bring a pollinator-driven garden to it and offered to maintain that garden in the future so it doesn't become a burden on the taxpayer at Oak Bay, but everyone gets to participate in enjoying that. The immediate I'd like to now turn kind of to the privacy question. This has been raised by a couple of folks. One of the unique aspects of this site is it only has 2 neighbors, 2 residential neighbors. And in that context, even further, both of the buildings that are adjacent present to this property the sides of the house. So in a typical infill project that you experience here in the city, an infill building goes in, maybe a 3-story townhouse project. They're looking across at 3 or 4 buildings immediately across the street. From behind, they would be looking in the bedroom windows of multiple homes in the back, and then they would present a side-to-side ratio to the 2. In this case, the building on the north actually is perpendicular to the site, and the building on the west, the only 2 frontages that have a neighbor, again, is parallel to this project. And as such, the actual interference of windows and eyeballs and the privacy concern is quite limited. Further to that, the 2 neighboring buildings are single-story buildings. The one to the west, the one to the north, as you see in this lower left picture here, the one closest to us, definitely a clean single-story building. It has a very mature cluster of Gary oak trees along its property line between this property and themselves. On the west, you can see in the gray home there that's just visible, it's just slightly over 1 story. It kind of has a half a story up, but there's a grade difference there. What this means is that while there are very few windows looking into these areas to start with, the extent of where those windows are, because the whole ground floor will be covered with fencing and foliage, are looking on top of the roofs. And as such, the actual experience of privacy is significantly less than we would otherwise expect for proximate buildings in a situation like this. The tree retention issue also has come up. There is 1 Gary oak tree roughly just slightly off middle in the project. We don't know how old it is. We didn't do a core on it. We presume it was probably planted somewhere around the time the house was built, but we're not sure. It's got a DBH of something like this. It's quite significantly less in size than all of the other Gary oaks that are immediately along the property line in the edges of the Uplands Golf Course, and more particularly on the neighbor to the west, which has an absolutely fabulous grove of very ancient Gary oak trees. Because the site has so few trees, this project proposes to plant many more trees, so we would be looking at achieving far more than the Oak Bay canopy targets, and as such, we'd be looking at a much greater net benefit to the foliage and the tree canopy than there is on the site today. The final point before I close is just on access. There are 2 points that this site could be accessed. One is off Lansdowne directly, the other is off Woodburn, as the site fronts on both properties, or both streets rather. The owner, in discussion with traffic consultants, chose to bring in the entrance off Woodburn. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this, and they are the strengths and weaknesses of this discussion regarding traffic. Woodburn is a very quiet street. It has roughly 20 homes between Wessex and the cul-de-sac, and as such, it has very little traffic on it. This, of course, is something that the neighbors quite value in this regard. With respect to Oak Bay's transportation network, it makes sense then to bring the access in off Woodburn because this is relatively quiet and underutilized street. That's the first reason. The second reason, when people exit this project up Woodburn, they have multiple different directions they can go to then access the city's grid. So they can go down south on Henderson and arrive at Lansdowne if they want to come into Oak Bay or out on Hillside. They can go north on Henderson or the other streets in the area and reach north toward UVic or up towards, say, Shelburne and Mackenzie. This then distributes and reduces the amount of traffic. The projected traffic on Woodburn from this project at peak hour, when we study the most number of people coming and going, there's traffic out throughout the day, but the main concentration occurs between 3:30 and 5:30. The 13 units in this townhouse project are projected to essentially have roughly one trip per unit over the 2-hour period. This brings us to about 7 vehicles per hour is the projected amount, or roughly 1 vehicle every 9 to 10 minutes. So as such, if we think about how long it would take if we clicked a watch now and waited 9 minutes before the next vehicle would go down the street, there is an impact, but it's a very minor impact given the benefits of the diversity of housing that is proposed on this unique site. Garbage, that's once every 2 weeks. That would be a private contractor. There would be deliveries, so DoorDash, the odd Amazon truck. We have 3 on-site visitor and delivery parking stalls, so that can happen on the site quite comfortably with plenty of turning room. The parking within the project is all handled comfortably within each of the townhomes. So we believe that the traffic impact is the least impact on the overall Oak Bay community and traffic, particularly as Lansdowne is projected to have bicycle lanes, and it's also quite busy during the peak hours. So then in summary, this is a unique site, not only because of its location, because of its size and shape, allowing us to locate two buildings with 13 homes with a very short driveway and not using up the whole site for pavement in that regard. It's aligned with many of the OCP policies. It's in a very unique location that very few places in Oak Bay get to benefit from within a short active transportation distance of all these critical uses. 3-story height that fits in with the infill policies that you have, and it greatly enhances the tree canopy and the public realm improvements. So then to conclude, council has a number of choices in the council report that staff have put forward. Regardless of which choice you choose, because there's quite a diversity of opinions on this, we would seek council's direction, your comments, your advice, your guidance on this project. I think we all understand that this is a kind of a project that council is relying on to avoid very, very tall buildings and tall towers over the future. This is something like that, and we're very interested in your guidance on how you would give us direction and your thoughts and insights on how we might proceed. I will end it there, and we have our team here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holland. I appreciate that presentation, and I hope you don't feel rushed. I mean, this is our chance to tease through this and to give that feedback that you've suggested, and certainly our order of business here is pretty much standard. We'll take questions from members of council, either to staff or to the applicant, and then we'll come back to this table to have some discussion. So I have Councillor Patterson, Green, Smart, Braithwaite. Everybody.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And through you to the applicant, this has been under discussion with the community, and as you said, you've held an open house for the community members. And so could you share with us, has the plan, since its first iteration, has the plan been modified in any way to reflect neighborhood input?
Mr. Holland?
Thank you, through your worship. The plan has been going under It has been undergoing discussions and work and refinements. The proposal you have before you is essentially what was originally submitted. This is the first time we've had the chance to come before council, so it's very close to the original plan. There has been ongoing work responding and looking and seeing what we can do, but what you have before you here is very close essentially to what was originally submitted.
Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Thank you. The report does reference that the site plan has been developed because of some of the challenges of grade changes from Lansdowne Street. And I'm wondering if the applicant could share what are some of the barriers to development on that land from the change in elevation.
Thank you, through your worship. The grade changes are a couple of meters overall between sort of the grade of Lansdowne. I don't have the precise amount, but it's in that range. We have some anxiety about the rock. There's some rock in the area, and what we also are aware of is the concern that many Oak Bay residents have around blasting. That's, of course, definitely something that can be done here, but the discussion on the height was really a trade-off between needing to essentially come up. If we were going to start lowering the whole site, that's a very significant amount of rock to move. And so at this point, it was thought that if the entrance comes in off Woodburn, that is at the same elevation, so we would keep basically the existing elevation of where those buildings are now.
Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate that. So it's actually more of a convenience for the development to come in off of Woodburn then. The next question that I have is, are any of the units adapted or been adapted to accommodate occupants with disabilities?
Thank you, through your worship. We don't have a specific plan to structure these units for those with the needs for high levels of accessibility. Currently, they were, well, many different folks would like to live in that, but we don't have an accessibility target right at the moment.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, again to the applicant. Page 46 makes references to affordable housing compared to single-family dwellings in the same neighborhood. Is there information to support that statement?
Thank you, through your worship. We don't have a price list for the units right now. That is mainly because at whatever time, as we go through the approvals process and then through a construction process that would take a minimum of 2 years, we don't know what the market is going to be like or what the costs would be required to construct these units at that point, so we don't have a specific price list. The units are in the range of 1,200 to 1,800 sort of square feet, in that range, including garages. And as such, then we're looking at the typical construction prices for those. This is not intended to be an affordable housing project. However, in contrast to the new build of the new homes that are going into the area, this is a significantly probably more attainable price point than a much larger brand new home on a full lot down the street from this. The difference in price between what a new townhouse of this scale might be versus an existing unrenovated home in the area, which is going to be going for lot value plus a small amount. I don't know what the ratios of those would be, but they're probably going to be much closer in regard to that. So, as is always the case, more attainable or affordable housing is always old housing. This will be new and high quality construction. So it's not intended to be something that targets, very inexpensive or very low income folks in this area.
Else?
Yes, just one other item that I would like to add is that there are many references within the reports to transportation, active transportation in the neighborhood, which does include not just cycling, but it does include pedestrian and bus transportation. However, the location, although there are bus routes that do flow around it, some of them go directly from the university and they don't stop again until Shelburne and Hillside. So I don't know that is really benefits this development. And I will add that once again that the area is not identified as a TOA, a transportation-orientated area in the province's guidelines. And in fact, while there's a number of bus routes in proximity to it, they're not, some of the timeframes that are in the report are a little off.
I'm going to turn into a question because there's really a question
Yeah.
period here. Do you wish to
Yeah.
just address the transportation benefits, just given the comments made here, Mr. Holland? You were just sort of essentially calling into question how viable it is as a transportation corridor, given there's limited transit on the street itself.
Right, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, Lansdowne itself is not a transit-oriented, that's not a transit route that has a lot of these. The transit routes are largely Foul Bay, Hillside, and that kind of interaction. So that's about 500 meters from this site, so it's a comfortable, it's basically flat walking distance to get there. These bus routes do not go in front of the project itself. We fully acknowledge that. That's very definitely part of the issue. But a 500-meter distance to be able to access that, given costs of car use or something for folks who might rent there, or if they are going to be going to UVic, either as a student or as a faculty member or as a staff member, there's a very major amount of destinations here within basically 1,500 meters, 500 meters to Camosun that make it, you're not living on top of them, you're not living right across the street from them, but this would be considered quite an active transportation friendly location given those situations compared to many other neighborhood areas in Oak Bay.
Thank you for that, Mr. Holland.
Yeah.
I have Councillor Green for questions, then Smart, then Braithwaite, Watson, and then Appleton.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mayor, to Mr. Holland, thank you very much for the presentation and for being here. And I noticed on page 3 of the staff report under application timeline, it references the fact that this application appeared before the Advisory Design Panel and the Advisory Planning Commission in May of 2025, and then the applicant voluntarily requested that the district place this application on hold as they attempted to work with the neighborhood to build more support for the proposal. I just wonder, through the mayor, if you could describe to me what that process looked like in terms of working with the neighborhood to garner more support. Thank you.
Mr. Holland?
Thank you, Your Worship. That process has primarily been one of individual meetings. The landowner has personally stepped into the process here. Us as a consulting team are often, wrapped around it. The landowner has specifically stepped into this and begun meeting with the representatives and members of the immediate community to talk through the rationale behind the issues, to get their feedback on those things, et cetera. I think there was a sense in the team and that there was a lot of different opinions in that discussion. I mean, there was obviously the concerns were similar, but the kind of level of response wasn't the same. And as such, the desire was to come to council to get some sense of how council feels about something like this, so that we have a sense of what the highest priorities are. Again, we have no idea how you will respond to this. And I think following that discussion, there was a desire, given the disparity of feedback, was to come and have a conversation with yourselves.
Thank you. Councillor, go ahead, Councillor Green.
Just a further question through you to Mr. Holland. Mr. Holland, my only concern about that is that you've had between May and now to work with the neighborhood to consult, and yet no modifications of any extent have been made to the proposal. So I'm just curious about that. Could you just answer that question for me? Thank you.
Thank you, through your worship. The answer to that one is not a highfalutin one. It's a very simple one. The owner has a number of children, and they were extremely busy this summer, and they were simply not here. And the owner takes a very close hand in how this went. So essentially, the whole project was put on pause for a good deal of the summer, other than occasional conversations, and it has now reignited, and so everyone is back at the table again to begin to move. There's no mystery or intended to be read into that. It was just a simple practicality of the owner's daughter does a lot of horse riding, and they were frankly on the Lower Mainland for almost 3 months. And as a result, the team sort of was waiting. So that's the simple fact around how it was.
Thank you.
Your Worship, would you append to the owner?
The owner wishes to come forward. Can you just state your name and municipality and
Hi,
residence
Jennifer
for the
Trout,
record?
the Oak Bay resident. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor to answer your question. Earlier this spring, I had met in person a number of neighbors related to this project at a community open house meeting they attended for another proposal I have in the district. Further to that in-person meeting, one-on-one conversations were ongoing, both in person and over the telephone. And a commitment was made that we would continue to work together through some of the challenges that the neighbors had identified. And as a gesture of good faith and my willingness to continue to work with those neighbors, I respectfully ask staff to pull the application from the May agenda. However, due to some unforeseen circumstances from the neighbors' perspective, they haven't been able to communicate with me over the last 3 months. So I asked staff to put forward our item back on the agenda to move forward as Mark had suggested. I do have reassurance from the neighbors that I was in discussion with that we will absolutely be able to continue, the process this fall, and they are willing to re-engage with me and further our discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I now have Councillor Smart and then Braithwaite.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. My first question is just with regards to site areas for gathering. The applicant letter described common areas on the site, and these weren't entirely clear to me in the site plan, and I'm wondering if the applicant can elaborate on the sort of shared community spaces in this design and sort of the ability to walk around the site both as neighbors meeting neighbors, but also people from the neighborhood being able to navigate through the site, if that could be elaborated on. Thank you.
Mr. Holland?
Thank you. Through your worship, the common areas and the ability to move around the site is primarily through the proposed pathway that runs around the side. There isn't a proposed public easement that would have people coming down Woodburn and going right through the site. I mean, if they want to walk onto the property and trespass, they certainly can come through. There's pathways all the way through, but that's not the intended of that one. So in terms of public meeting areas for the neighborhood on the site, that's not what was, if that was poorly written, then that was our responsibility. That's on us. With respect to in the site itself, most everyone has a front yard, and there's a pathway, pathways that kind of connect those in some ways, particularly along the back side, so they can meet each other across small low gates and things like this. So a bit of private, a little bit of shared within the community. And then the interior courtyard, which is where the vehicles access that's essentially envisioned to be, let's call it street hockey central. That's envisioned where, the kids would play, things like that. They're nicely enclosed. It's safe. It's lots of eyeballs in there to kind of watch things and keep things safe. And it's a hard surface where skateboards, bicycles, street hockey, that can be played. So there's a sense of a community intended here amongst the homes, but the public kind of travel area is offered along the current existing pathway on the eastern edge.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Another question I had was just with regards to landing on this sort of site configuration and just looking at sort of contextual fit in the neighborhood. And I wondered if the applicant in arriving at this design also looked at like another configuration, say like an L shape where you'd have townhouses looking out over the golf course, and then on Lansdowne and having a massing of the building that related a little bit more to particularly that north neighbor that's most impacted. And I wondered if you could just address how this massing plan was the final decision. Thank you.
Mr. Holland.
Thank you, through your worship. If with permission, I think this might be a good time to bring in Colin, our architect, Colin Harper. He is online. Colin, if you're able to unmute there. I think you would be having the person who's worked on the different massing scenarios would probably be the best one to speak to that, if that's okay, Your Worship.
Absolutely, yes. Welcome, Mr. Harper.
Hi, thanks, Mark. I don't know if you guys can see a site plan here. Is there something up on the screen?
There is not on the...
Am I able to share my screen?
I believe you can share your screen, yeah. You can do that.
If you guys, yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Or you can refer to a page on the agenda package as well if you wish, but if you have it handy, you might as well just share it.
Yeah, sure.
Better just share it.
I have page 26 of 159 and as a practical one, but...
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
We can, thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. So as far as the building footprints go and where we've located the buildings off of Lansdowne Road, I mean, what's I think it's in the design guidelines and the OCP, but or at least it is in the draft OCP and guidelines, but with townhouse developments, the for the OCP, buildings should be oriented towards the street. So, on Lansdowne here, the desire and I think that from an urban design perspective, the kind of correct orientation for a building here is for all these units to have their front entrances facing the street, so you get kind of individual accesses and your entries off of Lansdowne. And these buildings also need to have, we're proposing parking. So with parking, they need to have access to the garages and the unit. So we're already going to need to have, like, the fact that this building B is here is sort of a given, and the fact that this driveway here is a given. If I'm understanding correctly, I think the question is could there not have been a building, an L shape, like a building here, for instance. But doing that would then require another driveway in front of this building to access. So all of a sudden your site is completely covered in driveways. This is a kind of a tried and true, very kind of typical and for a good reason way to design a townhouse development, where you have for efficiencies, where you have a shared driveway in the middle with garages off of either side of that. So I think it was the obvious choice in that regard to lay out the buildings this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I just have one more question right now, and then I'll give the floor to my colleagues. It was just a note with regards to, and I really appreciated seeing the thought to provide bike parking in the garages, and it was just a little bit hard to understand the feasibility of that layout without car and bike symbols in the drawings. And I just wondered if council today moves forward with a recommendation that asks staff to work with the applicant. Is it possible in another rendition to include bike and car symbols so that we can just sort of see the feasibility of that actually working, so that you can open your car door and still have a electric bike plugged in, that kind of thing? Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Harper?
Yes, we can show bike symbols in any subsequent drawing submissions.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Braithwaite, Watson, and Appleton.
Thanks so much, Mayor, and through you.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I am actually going to need a motion to extend the meeting by 45 minutes.
I'm going to extend the meeting till 11 o'clock.
Okay. Is there a seconder? I was going to say, ask our questions quickly, please. Moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Please continue.
Thank you. I do have a lot of questions. I'll try and ask them as quickly as possible. Can you please give me your justification on the proposed density of 13 units on this lot, given that the current RFO zoning allows only for 4 units, and even proposed small multi-scale unit regulations suggest a maximum of 6 units?
Thank you, through your worship. What we saw in this, it's a great question, and through your worship to Councillor Braithwaite, what we saw in this site, because it is square, there are other sites that are of similar size further up Woodburn, but they're much more elongated. In situations like this, you end up essentially with a long paved driveway plus the garage accesses. What we saw in this site was a clean and simple, being basically square, ability to put 13 units and still have 58% open space and achieve an over 40% canopy target from the trees. And as such, when we went through the public objectives, we noticed that there was an opportunity to add more housing here in a way that had remarkably low impact on the community, but would help the municipality achieve its housing targets and make the project more financially feasible.
Thank you. I think remarkably low impact might be a bone of contention there. However, I think this question probably goes to staff, and I'd just like to know if they could confirm that fire and emergency vehicle access requirements. So will the single driveway layout provide acceptable access under the fire code, including during the small truck waste collection events?
Give that to staff. Mr. Green?
Through your worship, yeah, fire were consulted on the application, and I believe those comments were passed to the applicant. I believe those comments were addressed. Perhaps Colin or Mark could answer that, but
If
a
I'm-
while
if
since
I can answer that.
Okay,
if you'd
thanks,
like.
Colin.
Go ahead, Mr. Harper.
Okay. The site does not require the use of the internal driveways for firefighting access per BC building code. It has the required street frontage just through Lansdowne and Woodburn without the need of using the on-site driveways for fire truck access.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. Okay. I did notice, I thought when I read through the report that it had inconsistent parking figures. So I just wanted to clarify what the exact number of resident and visitor parking stalls was. And maybe staff can let me know what's required under the current zoning bylaw. And then how will the visitor parking be enforced?
Mr. Holland, want to just confirm the parking that's
So we have,
included?
thank you, through your worship, we have 17 parking stalls that are in the garages. We have 3 surface parking stalls, of which one is designed to be accessible, so it's the extra large size. So those are the 2. This gives us a internal rate of 1.3 units, 1.3 stalls per unit. The bylaw requirement is 2 per unit, so we'd be looking from within the actual homes themselves, would be looking for a variance of 9 on that. The 1.3 exceeds a lot of the new standards, which are really a 1-for-1 typical ratio, but it is below your current standards by 9.
Mr. Braithwaite?
Thank you. And I think I heard you say that you will not be having adaptable, accessible units. But then can you maybe, and you might have answered this one already as well, will any of the units be secured as rental or below market housing? And if not, why was this not considered based on the Housing Supply Act goals?
Thank you. Through your worship, I'd like to clarify my answer regarding the accessibility. We haven't set one aside specifically and designed everything to that point. We do have one that has the opportunity to put an elevator in it. It's been designed to be able to insert an elevator, so that would assist in the accessibility performance. Regarding affordability, the question here primarily was just the economic feasibility of the project. The cost of land per door basically was set at a certain level of feasibility, and this was what they came up with in terms of that. So again, this is part of the guidance we're seeking from council in terms of what the priorities are. The cost of land in Oak Bay and in this neighborhood is rather expensive, and so the ability to begin to write down all the profit margins from any one unit, they then have to be added to all the other units or the bank won't finance it. So this is sort of where we end up.
Thank you, Mr. Holland.
Thank you. I think I seem to remember this piece of land actually sold for about 1.6 million, I believe. So
A few years ago.
yeah.
It's basically law value, yeah.
And then this question might be for staff. What's the timeline for a building permit relative to the district's ACC and DCC bylaws? And if the bylaws, if we haven't adopted those already, then does this confirm that this application retains in-stream protection or not?
Mr. Green?
Through the worship, so yeah, the district already adopted ACC and DCC bylaws earlier this year, so this application had in-stream protection as a precursor application. That essentially that in-stream protection would expire 12 months from the adoption date of those bylaws, and so they would need to have a building permit in place submitted with the district, but that's unlikely to be the case, and so it's likely, highly likely, that this application would be, if it's moved forward and council adopts the bylaw and then they submit a building permit, it will be subject to ACCs and DCCs that would equate to around $265,000 in those fees.
Thank you, because I mean, based on this application right here, though, they're talking about putting in a pollinator garden, and that was based on $4,000 per unit. correct, for the CAC?
Correct, yes. They haven't committed to a CAC contribution in line with Council's 2019 policy. They have suggested some on-site improvements as a way of meeting that community amenity, if you like.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. And then I know, Mr. Holland, you said that the developer would maintain the pollinator garden, and I wonder how that goes off in perpetuity. Like, how do we know that in 30 years you're still going to be taking care of this garden?
I think the staff report said it would fall under district, and that the maintenance cost that hasn't been determined yet. So I guess in the
So
report.
the maintenance cost would then go to
It's on
get
municipal
charged.
property, correct?
It's on municipal property, but so then it can. I'm sorry, I must not be understanding. Then how does the developer then pay for the maintenance of that in 30 years from now?
Mr. Holland?
We presume these precise details, given this is the first time this has come forward for discussion, have not been worked out in the form of a development agreement. We would presume there would be a development agreement held on covenant that would basically require this process. And if there was complaints or it fell into disrepair, the municipality would have the right to basically take any number of acts of enforcement for that. We imagine that this garden would essentially be integrated into the garden maintenance program as a strata. We presume there would be likely a landscape management company, and the maintenance of that pollinator garden would become part of their contract going forward.
But to be determined, obviously, if that was to go forward. Go ahead, Councilor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I'll ask one more question and pass it along. Given that the height and roof line of 12.5 meters for the roof and 10.4 meters for the building, what shadow and privacy studies were prepared for the immediate adjacent northern lot? Please, and thank you.
We go to Mr. Harper for that?
Sure, you can start with Mr. Harper, and then I can add any other extra comments. Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Harper, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. Mark, do you have the shadow study in the presentation as an appendix, or should I pull it up here?
Colin, I do not actually. If you can pull it up, that would be great.
Okay.
It came through after I had done the presentation.
So I'm just going to try to get this at a size as big as possible here, while you can see them all. So on the top row, left to right, is the equinox, March and September 21st. On the left here, we have 9 a.m., 12 p.m., noon on the equinox, and 4 p.m. on the equinox. The blue area, or the blue hatched area are the shadows from the proposed townhomes. And then the row below this is the summer solstice at 8 a.m., noon, and 5 p.m. And then in the winter, we have 10 a.m. in the morning, 12 p.m., noon, and 3 p.m. in the evening. And I can provide some more commentary on these shadows if you like. But these are the diagrams. These are the shadow impacts.
Great, thank you for that, Councilor Braithwaite.
Thank you. And I did have one more question. Do we know, you talked a little bit about blasting and that your reasoning for putting the driveway on the Woodburn side is because you didn't want to have to do as much blasting for driveway access as what you would have to on the Lansdowne side. But do we know how much blasting would be needed on this site overall? Because that is a big concern. It is on a big piece of rock. And to build as high up on that piece of rock is going to be very intrusive as well. So how much blasting will you, or do you feel that you must do on that site?
Mr. Holland?
Mark, can I comment on that?
Please go ahead,
Go
Colin.
ahead.
Yeah. The building design as shown will require very little cut and fill, so very little amount of soil will need to get removed for this development, and similarly, very little soil will need to be brought in. So it's basically even from a cut fill perspective, and there's, you know, what we're showing right now would have is the option, is the kind of site design that would require the least amount of blasting possible.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I have next Councillor Watson and Appleton.
Thank you. I have a few questions for the applicant, and then I do have one for staff. During the presentation, you talked about, Mr. Holland, you talked about the traffic study and this idea that using Woodburn as the point of access allowed traffic to be distributed kind of more broadly through the neighborhood, or there was more flexibility. I just wanted to ask you to go a little deeper on that, because I'm trying to compare that to what would happen if a car came out of Lansdowne, and what are the big differences between an exit on Lansdowne in terms of traffic distribution versus an exit in Woodburn, and a sort of its permeability or ability to move through the neighborhood. If you could just comment on that, please.
Thank you, through your worship. An access on Lansdowne would put, again, we're still dealing with a fairly small amount of traffic in the big picture of things of, you know, one vehicle every 10 minutes roughly. It would go on to Lansdowne. If it's a busy time, turning left on Lansdowne to head down toward the uplands would be probably a bit of a challenge. Most of the destinations would be further west from that, whether they're going up to UVic, in which case they would go to Foul Bay, turn right to head to UVic. Otherwise, they'd continue straight down Lansdowne onto Hillside. That would take them to any Richmond, the schools, St. Michael's and the other schools, or the Hillside Mall, or further into the downtown of Victoria. Or they would turn left at Foul Bay to head into the core of Oak Bay. So essentially the traffic would largely be channeled from Lansdowne into the busy intersection of Foul Bay and Lansdowne as it stands now. Maybe a small amount would go left. The traffic study did not look at those options because we were looking at what the proposed plan was following that discussion. So everything essentially loads up. The majority of the trips we expect would load into the Lansdowne Foul Bay intersection. If, on the other hand, it uses Woodburn, then some traffic would come down, would get onto Henderson, turn left, and come down to Lansdowne, at which point that percentage of the traffic would have the same level of impact as if everybody was going on to Lansdowne. So they would end up coming into the intersection of Lansdowne and Foul Bay as really the choice on which they go. However, the percentage that would want to go to UVic, they would go north on Lansdowne, at which point then north on Henderson, at which point it becomes Henderson all the way to UVic. So anything that would head north would not then be interacting with the busy intersection of Foul Bay and Lansdowne. That's the primary difference in those two, is that anyone who's headed north would not then be adding traffic to that main intersection. That's the main primary difference between the two. The backup from Henderson onto Lansdowne was raised in the community discussions we had. There's concern there about how busy Lansdowne is, how fast people are traveling, because we're already 2 blocks into Lansdowne. So adding more traffic on Henderson or more traffic into Lansdowne further exacerbates that intersection between Lansdowne and the south-facing Henderson. So any traffic that can go north then relieves some of that pressure. And again, we're still dealing with 1 vehicle every 10 minutes at peak hour. So notwithstanding the conversation, this is not a catastrophe in terms of the change in traffic.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you. I wanted to go and explore a little bit more also the amount of private outdoor space that these units might have. Is it, from my reading of the site plan, it looks like all the outdoor space that is actually associated with a unit is actually semi-private, in that it can be seen between units. Or is there any actually pure private outdoor space that are assigned to any of these units on the plan?
With your permission, Your Worship, I'm thinking this might be a good time to bring in our landscape architect. He's here from Ladder. He's here with us, Chris Winjack.
Sure, Mr. Winjack.
Hi, hello everyone.
There, welcome. Did you have a chance to hear the question?
No, could you repeat the question, sorry?
Yes, sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was asking about, well, it's both semi-private and private outdoor space that is available to these units collectively and individually. And my reading of the plan is that it looks like it's all in effect semi-private, but I wanted, because it's kind of open to all the other units. But is there any pure private space, truly private space available for any of these 13 townhomes as currently shown?
So the 13 townhomes would have, they have private patio spaces that are gated and separated from each other by privacy screens and raised planters. The rest of the landscaping on the site is essentially shared between the townhouse development. So there are no private yards. The patios are the sort of boundary of their private space.
Thank you. The next question is about site circulation, and I guess it's maybe Mr. Holland can respond to this or send it to one of his colleagues. There are, I think you said, in effect, 1.3 parking spaces per unit, and I'm never the one who's asking for more parking. I think there's probably plenty of parking, but I am concerned about circulation. So I want to know, if people don't use the adequate parking that's given to them in the garages, but they park their cars in front of their units, what happens to the site circulation plan? And that could actually be bikes or cars, for that matter. Is there, I want to understand that laneway, that where the two sets of garages back onto each other. And if one or two owners come in and actually don't park in their assigned parking spaces, what happens to the community? Like, what's going on there when that happens? They've got space, but they didn't use it. And then what are some of the likely scenarios in terms of moving around?
Thank you. It's a great question. I'll offer my thoughts, and then Colin may have some additional thoughts as well. That courtyard access point for driveways would not be of a size that permits people to park outside their garage. In some cases, folks can design those, but if you're going to make that reliable, you would need several meters to 5 meters. 5 meters would be a typical length of a vehicle. That would make that courtyard probably significantly larger. So that courtyard is designed to support backing out of your garage, a comfortable, safe turning distance, not getting too close to the opposing area and coming out. So the strata rules, and everyone would be maintaining these, because it would, if someone parks there in the middle of that way, you're basically blocking, your neighbors from being able to get out of their garage potentially. So the structure and design of this is intended that would not become a area littered with cars that are violating the parking area if they need to use their garages. Colin, did I miss anything on that?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I
Thank you.
think the strata rules would, prohibit that, and it's just functionally not meant for cars to park in. I mean, this is a very common type of layout for townhouse developments, and this is never really an issue, what you're describing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Councillor Watson.
if I could just follow up on that a little bit. I'm also thinking about bikes. I know that these strata councils have rules, and I just wonder, in practice, you've got experience designing them, and maybe post-occupancy what actually happens. But does this create, when there is so little room, like what happens if kids start leaving their bikes in the courtyard? What?
You just need a very big truck to get over them. I think that's the answer.
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms of bike parking, so we can look at that in a number of ways. Obviously, if someone is going to leave their bike lying in the middle of that shared driveway area, it's whoever is backing out with their vehicle will hopefully catch that before they drive over it, get out and move that bike at some point. We have a visitor bike. We have good 6 visitor parking stalls for bikes. Plus, of course, there is the courtyards. If you're coming to meet somebody and you know who you're coming to, you can park them there as well. So the visitors are handled, the owners are handled through the garages. So in the case of a child leaving their bike, that would be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, and I'm presuming mature folks would move the bike out of the way. But I'm not sure that can be changed much in any home. That happens in single-family homes as well.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I 2 more questions. These are both for staff, probably for Mr. Green or Mr. Bowl. Thank you. I wanted to just clarify something. Since it's almost assured that the amenity cost charge bylaw will apply to this project, does that mean the community amenity contributions are off the table, or can it be both things? I'm not clear about how those provisions might work in combination, or they don't.
Well, I don't want to presume the outcome of this discussion here tonight, but if it gets sent back to staff and there's significant changes, it's likely to exceed that, so.
No, but I guess it's a question of actually what the bylaw
Yes.
allows. Are you allowed to charge both things is my question, right?
Sure. Go ahead, Mr.
Through your worship, to Councillor Watson, obviously one is a bylaw that is required, and the other is a voluntary amenity contribution that is a negotiation between the district and council giving rezoning in order to facilitate additional density. So there is essentially a negotiation that takes place in light of council days and using council's policy to guide those discussions and negotiations.
Thank you. I just needed that clarification before I ask the second part of this question, then I'll be done. In the staff report, staff mentioned a couple of suggestions of things that were offered to the applicant to reflect on, and such as trail improvements or pedestrian safety improvements were two things mentioned. Was there any response to those at all? Or was, as the pollinator garden proposal is presented, the only thing that has really been suggested by the applicant at this point?
Mr. Green?
Through your worship, I was just reviewing our initial comments on this application back from some time ago. So my understanding is that obviously it's a voluntary contribution, and so we've obviously outlined what the policy can require, and obviously the applicant has responded initially with this notion of the on-site improvements. That being said, if council wishes to explore that with the applicant, I'm sure the applicant would still be willing to further consider that contribution.
Okay, that's everything for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to our guests. I guess my questions are maybe a little bit more broad-based and a little bit sort of broader in scope. As the proponents well aware, we're right in the middle of an OCP review and an OCP development, and is probably aware of a lot of the underlying guiding principles and concepts that we've put to the public as far as how we will plan for additional density in the district. So if you look at the location of this building, you can kind of look at it a number of different ways. You can look at it as being a reasonable walking distance to a transit route, but you can also look at it as being a fairly dense housing form located a fair distance from any significant amenities, which runs somewhat contrary to what we have put in front of the public as far as OCP objectives. Quite frankly, we're looking to the public to help us along with accommodating additional density in denser housing forms that the community has not seen up to this point. And so we're following a rigorous process to develop where those things should be put. So I guess my response would be here, as the proponent's probably well aware, obviously it doesn't fit very well with existing OCP language, nor does it actually fit with proposed OCP layouts for denser housing forms of this nature. And certainly this type of housing form is valued and has been included in the OCP review for a specific reason, in that in a lot of cases it will fit fairly well with the neighborhood context of Oak Bay. But how would the proponent respond if the community members are coming forward and saying, our understanding of this OCP amendment process is to put denser housing forms and these types of developments in places that are close to amenities, close to transit? This appears to not be completely outside of that, but certainly is not as in alignment with the goals of that OCP process. So how would you respond to that and by the same token, not to put too fine a point on it, but it essentially is a bit of a spot zone outside of what we would normally consider or what we would potentially consider in the new OCP.
Go ahead, Mr. Holland.
Thank you, through your worship. It's a great set of questions. We have been obviously involved with the OCP or tracking the OCP and going to some of the open houses and tracking some of this process. And obviously the previous OCP was involved in this. I think the way we looked at this site had a number of contributing factors with respect to the rationale for why something like this would be proposed here. In the OCP, there's a discussion around sort of corner lots or areas close to amenities. While the Uplands Golf Course is not a public park, it's a significant, one of the largest open spaces in the area, and with that brings a lot of sort of amenity along with the public path along next to it. Because this only has 2 neighbors that front the project, I think in our minds we sort of saw this as kind of a corner lot between 2 very, very different environments of how this would work. I think the second observation was in the size of the parcel. If you walk down Lansdowne toward Foul Bay and start looking at a lot of those sorts of parcels, when we look for the sizes of a townhouse project, we need a certain minimum size of the lot to deal with the driveways, the number of units that will be required, and the shape of the lot matters again a lot around how you can fit this in. The opportunity we saw here because of its size and its shape was this was a great opportunity to achieve some of those housing objectives, both public and private benefits that come from that one. That may not be the case in many of the areas in a sort of a more generic principal application that are closer to amenities, or they might require the acquisition of 2 or 3 lots, at which point we're now moving from, as Councillor Braithwaite noted, between $1.5 and $2 million for lots. You're now 2 to 3 times that in order to get the basis, in order to put those sorts of homes in which case townhouses do not deliver enough value to be able to offset that much land cost. They just simply don't work. So at that point then either nothing happens or you move forward. With respect to the sort of missing middle in the fourplex discussion on a site like this, if the site is selling for somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million and whatever its current value would be, and I don't know I haven't seen a current assessment of what it would be worth in the market today based on recent sales, we have to divide that by the number of units that are proposed. And so at that point, the cost of the units moves from, let's say we're at 400,000. If we're moving right now from something that's going to be getting us between $130,000 and $150,000 in land value per unit, we suddenly move to $400,000 or $500,000 in land cost per unit before we've even started building anything. So at that point, the price point for the units that come from that now rapidly begin to approach a single family home with a renovation or something. And so the challenge that's underpinning the problem with the missing middle process, and I was part of the team that wrote the policy manual for the Bill 44, the challenge we always saw was in the cost of land per unit, because the product, the housing unit being sold is a townhouse. You're sharing 4, but it's essentially a townhouse, 3 stories, you're sharing 2 walls, that's a townhouse, etc. And so your front yard is not enclosed as per the questions, the appropriate questions around the privacy of these areas. It's essentially the same type of person that buys a townhouse. You just have now 2, 3, 4 times as much cost in land. And the question is, does that work? So we're seeing uptake in different communities around how this works. But in terms of the actual housing density that can go on sites, a rare site of this shape and this size in a location that's close enough to be able to meet the active transportation and complete uses, we felt warranted the rationale of coming forward to talk with council and proposing this as a solution.
Mr. Holland, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship, and to you, I appreciate that response. I guess, so it got touched on briefly, but was there, I guess it's a pretty simple answer to the question, but were there other typologies entertained for the site that might generate maybe not necessarily an equivalent amount of units, but at least a close to comparable amount of units?
Thank you, Your Worship. Great question. I think if this is appropriate, I'd maybe get Colin or the owner to speak to that one in the early stages. That predated my participation in the project, so I don't know what conversations happened at that point.
Sure, I'll go to Mr. Harper.
Yeah, actually, I think divert to Jan, but if Jan would like to make some comments, but I will say though on the number of units. There was a question, this is similar to a question about why 13, And this question was asked during the advisory design panel, and our response, in which planning agreed with, was that the 13 units fit on the site. When you look at site coverage, open site space, tree canopy, and setbacks, we're meeting all of the requirements for, if you look at the draft zoning or draft OCP for the requirements for open site space, we're in alignment with that. They haven't gotten into the specifics on setbacks, but if you look at zoning townhouse zoned areas across the Capital Regional District, the setbacks that we're proposing are actually larger than or bigger than what you would typically see in a townhouse development. We have a minimum of, I think, 3.5 at a pinch point for side yards, 6 meters at the front and back, and all of these setbacks are bigger than what you would typically see for a townhouse development. So, in terms of the number of units, it's, just from a kind of a typical zoning bylaw perspective and functional layout of these units on the site, 13 fit comfortably.
If I may, Your Worship, add one more further thought to that. With respect to the lot size and the question of what typology would work this, if we look at the 3 lots that are immediately north, now these are much smaller than the surrounding areas, but these are not an uncommon size in Oak Bay. So we're looking at, the immediate north one, 3111, is 7,800 square feet. The one next to it, again, is just over 7,800, and the one beyond that is 7,400 square feet. So if you put those 3 together, you're only a few thousand square feet larger than this lot. And so if we imagine a fourplex being permitted, those are far above the sort of, the 3,000-4,000 square foot kind of limits for a fourplex in the original Bill 44. If we imagine 3 fourplexes on that, we're now at 12 units, which is very, very close. It would be highly inefficient, but that is actually envisioned and possible in this process. So you would not have anywhere near the same usable open space or the public, there would just be a much lower performance overall on those sorts of things in terms of the site coverage, et cetera. So this level of townhouses is pretty comfortable in terms of density for townhouses at 13 for roughly half an acre. That's quite a common kind of, it's not the low end of townhouses, but it's certainly not the highest end of some of the things that we see. So I think townhouses was seen as the market here, ground-oriented, supporting faculty, staff, even rentals, because you can get good 3 bedrooms in there for someone who otherwise might choose would not be able to afford a single-family home or end up having to live much further away where land values and costs are lower.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton?
Very quickly, Your Worship, and I appreciate that. Just to follow up on that last comment, that the density proposed is deriving primarily from, architectural design and sort of general fit for the site, and it's not necessarily trying to hit a certain volume of units to hit a certain price point. Like it was there is eventual cost of units, which is tough to predict at this stage of the game, given the constantly shifting nature of construction costs. But was eventual sales cost of the units factored into the density proposed?
Thank you, through Your Worship. I'm not in charge of the financial numbers for marking. That is not my responsibility, but this is a field that I work in and teach in. A financial pro forma is required before you would move forward on any of this. So there is very definitely financial numbers and targets that begin to drive the density. They set the stage for flexibility, at which point then, you push this down. We're only dealing with 13 units. You start knocking many of those off. You will cross a threshold where it's not feasible very, very quickly. So it is in there, but I can't speak to you, and it would not be something we would generally speak about in live meetings like this, but it's definitely part of the conversation. It is obviously beneficial to keep the price point as low as possible in a competitive market like this. So the number of units, the price per land, the size of those units are generally carefully thought through in a fairly competitive environment, particularly the competitive environment coming up as townhouses become default pre-zoned in many, many areas of our region.
And if I can, thanks, Mark, I just would like to add one thing, that this, the proposal as shown is a 1-to-1 FSR. There was some not misinformation, but just we didn't receive the correct guidance on how to calculate the FSR when in fact the garages are excluded from FSR. So this is going to be a one-to-one FSR, or FAR, as shown right now, and that's what is benchmarked for the future OCP for townhouse developments. So this much density, is what's envisioned for townhouse developments.
Thank you. Maybe that'll be my first question since I have the floor now. So we have in the presentation here, it shows an FSR of 1.6, but the statement made there is that it's actually 1.0 without the garages. I'm actually not clear in a comprehensive development that they are excluded from the FSR, but can we just get clarification on what the proper, maybe with and without garages are calculated?
Yeah, we do, through your worship, we clarified this with the applicant a few weeks back. So the zoning bylaw says in a zone other than a residential use zone, the part of the floor area used and maintained for the parking of motor vehicles shall be excluded from the computation of gross floor area. And as such, this is not a residential zone. They're proposing a CD zone, and so therefore the garages would be excluded from that calculation of GFA.
Okay, if we just pretend it's a residential zone, just for clarity, for comfort of understanding the thing, is the FSR 1.6 correct then?
No, it's not correct. It is one-to-one, as Colin just outlined.
1.1.
1.1.
1.1.
1.1.
No, sorry.
1.17.
Currently, it's shown on the drawings as 1.17 to 1, but that includes the garages. So excluding the garages, it will be a 1 to 1 FAR.
Okay.
So 1.17.
Yeah, but that's incorrect. It's actually a 1 FSR.
Yeah. If you include garages,
If you
1.17.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that
Correct.
clarification. It's maybe just some clarification. I appreciate the 58% open site space, but obviously most of that is paved. Do we have a sense of what percentage of the lot is actually green space?
If I can find that, Your Worship. And feel free to jump in, Colin, if you can get to that number faster than I can. You had it in the original.
There's 27% is paved, so that would leave, what's that, 73%.
So it would be probably 30% would be green then in that case. 58% total open site space minus the 27%.
Yeah, right, sorry, thank you.
Okay, no, thank you for that. So I guess this is back to a question of sort of architectural design setting piece of this. So, we're kind of, it's part of the difficulty, I think, is we're trying to assess what is reasonable and what we would like is that this is it's in a residential zone, but we're sort of treating it as a comprehensive development. And so to know what is the right sort of factors to use. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions because the setbacks, as noted, are reasonable in a residential zone, but as a comprehensive development kind of approach, it's obviously in a setting which has substantial setbacks and quite a low facade for the buildings that are there. And I'm just perhaps curious about why, maybe some contextual setbacks or lowering of somehow of the face to kind of give that sort of less of an imposing wall on that streetscape. If there's contemplation now, that really probably has to go to you, Mr. Harper.
Sorry, I'll have to ask you to ask the question again.
Sure. I was just saying that, like, in that context, along that street, there's all of the houses are set well back from the street. They're obviously, as noted, they're older, but they're all sort of in that maybe 1.5 story pieces. They're contextually, this is out of step with that sequence along there. And I think where we have considered this kind of form factor has, as noted in the potential OCP changes, have been in other areas of the community, not here. So I'm just trying to get a sense, if you're looking at this as a sort of a comprehensive one-off, you know, it's a big lot. It certainly has an opportunity for having more than 4 units. I think that's a reasonable ask, but in the context of this, it doesn't seem to have made an effort to fit that, the rhythm of the street or the setbacks of that street or even kind of like the scale. So I'm just kind of curious as to the why that is structured in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason is like the same reason we didn't design the building to try to look like the single family homes next door, or the door next to that is, you know, this is a different typology. It's not a single family home, and the, you know, kind of looking, the OCP and the zoning are going to be looking forward to a different type of, you know, development that is different than what was built and when those buildings were built in post-war. So, you know, to kind of design a townhouse development based off of a building that was sited and built, you know, from 70 years ago, you know, it wouldn't work. This typology just wouldn't work if you tried to kind of make it look like the house next door, or to cite it like the house next door. And I don't think it should be, really, because it is just fundamentally different. But, you know, there are things that we have done to, you know, make it more sympathetic to the existing residential character, as Mark mentioned, that the pitched roofs, which are kind of a very recognizable, familiar form, but, you know, not trying to mimic anything, you know, from the 50s or 60s, whenever these buildings were built, but, you know, being honest to current construction and development methods.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess the only other question really along that is the, you know, part of that massing sense is the full sort of 3 stories. It's going to be up, you know, it's a bit elevated off of the road there. Is there any contemplation of having these being more of a sort of a 2-story, or at least a 2-story presentation to the street? To you, Mr. Harper.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a desire to provide parking for all of these units, private garages, so that kind of takes up your ground floors. Essentially, you know, there's a little bit of space left over for an entrance and a mudroom, but that's your ground floor. So if it was just a 2-story building, that would only leave one floor above that, and they were wanting to do family-sized units, so this is a mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms, somewhat flex spaces on top of that, but you know, what you're describing with the garage would you know, maybe be a two bedroom unit max. Probably not though. You're kind of trying to fit a living area, kitchen, bedrooms all above the garage. So they wanted them to be, you know, family sized units with garages.
Okay, thank you. And I guess that presumes the number of units. Obviously, you could have fewer units and manage that, but to have the 13 units, it does limit you to that 3 stories.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the clarification on the FSR as well. That's helpful. I have one other question, a supplemental. Please go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I just want to go back to a question that Councillor Watson had asked about the access. And Mr. Holland, you talked about the reason, one of the reasons that the driveway was not coming off on Lansdowne was because of the difficulty of turning left onto Cedar Hill, onto Lansdowne. Thank you. But then you went on to say that they would go out the other way, and then they're still going to have to turn left onto Lansdowne anyhow to get onto Cabaret Bay Road. So I don't understand what the difference would be to coming out of the driveway there or coming out of the driveway at Henderson to turn left onto Lansdowne to get to Cabaret Bay Road.
Thank you, Your Worship. Great question. The main difference is just whether you're doing it out of a curb cut in a driveway, crossing through a bike lane mid-block, or whether you're coming out at an intersection would really be primarily the difference on that one. So turning left onto Cadborough Bay, there's not going to be a lot of difference. I also think it's probably not very many vehicles that would be doing that. The majority of all the destination is going to be to the right. So the primary difference was all traffic ends up at the intersection between Foul Bay and Lansdowne rather than distributing across Foul Bay, Lansdowne, and Henderson.
Great, thank you very much. We have motions, we have a recommendation here from staff, and I think a very reasonable request from the applicant if that motion is moved and supported by council, to send it back for further discussion, to give as much clarity, and I'd probably just go around the table if that was the case, to give as much clarity as possible to the applicants. I think that's entirely reasonable. But we have three options here, essentially. Advance it for public input, through a public hearing, as is, send it back for consideration of changes, or declining the application as it's in front of us. So those are the three pieces that we have. Unless there's any other questions, I might seek a motion from someone in council to move us forward. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
I'm going to move that the proposed development at 2298 Lansdowne Road be denied.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Been seconded? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I do have some comments on this. So I'm speaking on behalf of the neighbors concerned about this proposal. I acknowledge that the need for housing and that the modest infill along the collector roads can be appropriate. However, this particular proposal raises a set of practical and planning concerns that I would ask council to take seriously before approving an OCP design or rezoning. First, the site access arrangement, routing all the vehicles across to Woodburn Avenue. That will send traffic onto a narrow residential street and creates awkward and potentially unsafe turning movements at the dead end. The driveway is one-way in parts, and the proposed private waste collection approach will temporarily block the only vehicle access. And I would ask that we require a thorough demonstration that access from Lansdowne is infeasible, to require the applicant to provide robust access analyses if my motion fails. Second, visitor and delivery parking are not adequately secured, and the risk of on-street spillover, I think, is really real. We should require clearer binding parking solutions, as well as reduce the unit count before advancing the rezoning. And third, the scale and the height. The 12.5 meter roof and FAR of, I think it's 1.6, is materially larger than immediate neighbors and will reduce privacy for the house to the north. And I would ask that we insist on revised massing, improved setbacks or screening, and a demonstrated plan to mitigate privacy, as well as less as units, because the 13 units is far too many in my opinion. And finally, while the in-kind pollinator gardener is welcome, it's not equivalent to the trail upgrades and pedestrian safety improvements staff have recommended. So if the public realm is to benefit, we should require a costed guaranteed package, both path upgrades and a pedestrian beacon or equivalent, or an appropriate CAC to secure those improvements. If my motion fails tonight, I would urge council to direct staff to work with the applicant to revise a proposal to resolve access servicing concerns, correct parking and guest delivery management, reduce scale or increase setbacks to better fit the neighborhood, secure an accessible unit and realistic CAC or in-kind package with long-term maintenance commitments, and provide acceptable tree mitigation. So this proposal for me represents a level of change that I don't believe is appropriate for this neighborhood, nor consistent with the intent of our official community plan. Townhouses are to act as transitions between mixed-use areas and established neighborhoods. This site is adjacent to a golf course and not adjacent to a mixed-use node. While the applicant has clearly put time and effort into the design, the scale and form of what's being proposed do not fit comfortably within the existing context of Lansdowne Road and the surrounding area. Our community values gradual, well-integrated growth that respects established character and streetscapes. This project, however, asks for significant amendments to both zoning and the OCP to accommodate something that feels more intensive than what was envisioned for this part of Oak Bay. I'm particularly concerned about the precedent that the approval could set for future applications seeking similar exceptions. I also believe that the level of public concern and uncertainty that we've heard from nearby residents reflects a disconnect between what's being proposed and what the community feels is appropriate for the site. Council's role is to ensure that new development enhances the neighborhood livability, not undermines it. So for those reasons, I hope that Council will support my motion to deny the application In my view, it doesn't align with the guiding principles of our OCP, the scale and character of the neighborhood, or the expectations of the residents that we represent. Thank you.
So it's moved, seconded. Councillor Green?
Thank you very much. And as I seconded the motion, I'll be brief. I agree with all of the comments that Councillor Braithwaite has made. In addition, I'm concerned that there has been no overt attempt made to meet with and consult with this neighborhood in any meaningful way. This has been ongoing since May. Individual meetings really, I think group meetings are much more effective, and I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that there is no accessible features to any of these townhouses. They are 3 stories, I believe, and that is not accessible for people who can't take stairs. So there is nothing there. One of them is one of 13 will have an elevator, but that's a small percentage. They will not be below market. They are not. I'm even. It's a stretch to say that they're middle missing, or missing middle housing. And the reason I say that is because the 3-story triplex on St. Patrick's Street at 786, very similar design, smaller complex. They're selling for $1.599 million a piece, and so I'm sure that these will be in that neighborhood or that realm or higher. So there are also unresolved traffic issues and concerns and pedestrian concerns for this area. And my understanding was at one time there were concerns about access for trash trucks, picking up garbage and emergency vehicles and all those other things. So I am concerned about this. I think this proposal needs to be completely reworked. And so that's my position. I will not, I will support the motion, but not the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Motion on the floor is to decline. I think if this passes, it declines. If it fails, we'll get to, we would contemplate giving direction back. So any other discussion on this? I'd probably just appreciate anybody else wishing to speak to the motion right now, which is to decline. Anybody wish to speak to it? If not, I'll call the question. Oh, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just in the tradition of speaking, in opposition when you're opposed, I recognize that there are some fairly significant changes that could potentially be made to the application. I would say I would be in support of a referral to staff, and when I say that, I would actually put the onus to a certain extent on the developer here. I would like to see it referred, and so I'll speak to the motion that's actually in front of us, Your Worship, which is, whether or not it should be outright rejected. I feel like there is a fair amount of feedback that the developer has received from the members of the public, and the developer is also, as we've spoken to tonight, fairly well aware of the ongoing OCP process. So I would like to see this referred back for changes, and I would put the onus on the developer to respond to what the community has told them, and to be able to very clearly outline for both the community and council, in the context of an ongoing OCP discussion, how, essentially why it should be justifiable to do a spot zoning for this individual lot. What I have heard repeatedly from citizens over the course of this OCP process is a real strong desire to see us move away from spot zoning and create the predictability in neighborhoods that helps people understand where that density is going to be happening. So I think that there is modifications possible to this. So I would not support rejecting it outright, but I would certainly put the onus on the developer to respond to what the community has been communicating. Thank you, Your Worship.
Speaking to the motions on the floor, go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, I echo what Councillor Appleton is saying. I was in favor of referring the application to staff. I agree with most of the well-articulated comments that Councillor Braithwaite put forward, but I see almost all of them echoed in staff's referral recommendation. And I would agree to basically add on to the 4 specific bullet points that staff have highlighted in working with the developer to earnestly take into consideration the neighborhood feedback in revising the plan, particularly you know, I appreciate staff's comment around, you know, reducing the scale of change given the location being removed from mixed-use areas. So I am much more comfortable with referring it, particularly because this is the most desired housing type that I have heard from the community. When I went door to door, you know, 3 years ago when we had the election, there were every single night I would go out and talk to neighbors in all different neighborhoods. They want townhouse development. They want options to move out of their single family houses and into this kind of typology. So I see a developer here who I'm hearing is willing to revise and work with the community comments. I want to provide that opportunity for the developer to work with staff to provide this type of housing that I've heard a great amount of desire for, but we can't not recognize a lot of really valid points brought up by the community about their concerns and how we need to make this proposal even better.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Any other comments on the motion? Go ahead, Councillor Watson and Patterson. I'm just going to ask.
Yes, just
reasonably brief.
very quickly. That's where I'm leaning. I think I would like an opportunity to get past this motion to be able to talk about the things that we could and should be asking the applicant to do with staff. So I don't want to reject this proposal. I think there are merits to it and ways for improvement.
Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I will be supporting the motion. And my rationale for this, and I certainly have listened to the 3 councillors that feel it should go back to staff. And although I was perhaps leaning that way because I think it is good to go back to the drawing board sometimes, but in this one, it's such a major overhaul. For me, one of the prime motivators to deny it is the access off of Woodburn. I really think that is not acceptable. The application is on Lansdowne, and I think that trying to mitigate traffic on Lansdowne by redirecting it through other streets is something that is not something we should be pursuing, because not only does it change the traffic flow on Woodburn, it also limits the future potential redevelopment of properties on Woodburn, because you're already doing a transportation change without having a full neighborhood plan on that. So it's being done specific for this one development. So certainly for me, and Councillor Braithwaite did articulate very well a number of the issues that she saw, and I can understand that. But it really, for me, is that it's a Lansdowne application that is not on Lansdowne. Really, it's using other streets for this, and so it deviates quite far, not only from our existing OCP, but our, you know, what we've been working on with the new OCP. So I will support the motion to deny.
Before I go anywhere else, Ms. Anderson, I have a procedural question for you. I realize this meeting started at 8:55. I did extend it. Do we have to? Is the start time tied to the actual start time, or is the published time?
Thank you for the question. Because this meeting, the scheduled time was whatever time immediately followed the committee of the whole meeting, that is 8:55. So it's 3 hours after 8:55.
Okay, so I actually didn't need to do that motion. I don't need to do it right now. I just wanted to give us a bit of time to finish this piece of it. Thank you for the comments. So just my comments on this one. I'm not going to support the motion. I think that I'm the same way with a lot of people. I'm a long way away on this one. I just recognize this has had a lot of work come to this point. This is the first chance that the applicant has had a chance to speak to the decision-making body, which is council. And I think we owe that to give some feedback. I think I hear the concerns around the table, and I share a lot of them, but I think we should give as much clarity and opportunity for consideration, largely because I do think that it is a housing form that is highly desired in the community, and there may be some opportunity here for, at least, even if this ultimately doesn't go forward, I think the more clarity we can give them, the applicant, the better. And I think it's just fair for any applicants, have given the work that's gone into this, to give it a little bit of time spent on feedback. So I'm not gonna support the motions on the floor. I do think I want this to refer back with some clarity of feedback, so the applicant has some chance to work with that. So I'm gonna call the question at this point. I think everybody's had a chance to speak. All those in favor of the motion and those opposed, I'm gonna read them aloud. Councillor Watson, Appleton, Smart, and myself opposed. So we're back to the thing. I might suggest the motion that was recommended in the report.
Your Worship, I will move the staff recommendation.
Moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded. I think what I might do, despite I know people didn't feel it met the threshold for continuing at all, but I think those spoke largely to the primary concerns. But I'm still going to go around the table very quickly. If there's anything you wish to add to what you've already said in the cases of Councillor Green and others, but if others at the table haven't had a chance to kind of get the direct feedback. So I'm going to go around the table here and just ask if this attached to this resolution, what aspects of this would they like to see addressed in that send back? And I will note the primary ones here are the site access limitations, the scale, location, the accessibility, and in-kind financial. I think the financial thing we'll leave alone for the most part right now. I think let's just move on to the focus on the application merits. Go ahead, Councillor Green. Anything else?
Thank you. I will not support the motion to refer it to staff, as I said earlier, but I'll tell you what I'm puzzled about. I'm puzzled about the length of time between May and now, and no consultation has occurred. No meaningful consultation has occurred. There were changes recommended by staff. I don't believe all of those changes were considered or implemented, and it seems to me that this is a premature move to come to council now. I think it requires a lot more work on the ground with the neighborhood and with concerned residents, and I totally agree that townhouse form and character, that is housing that people want. But let's not sacrifice sites and neighborhoods just for the sake of what people have talked about wanting. I think it's really important to look at quality, accessibility, traffic flow and parking and all of that. So I will not support, and I understand my colleagues and why they want to do that, and I don't disagree with their comments or with them. I just take a very different take on this. I really think if there was real strength behind consultation by the developer, it would have occurred by now, and they would come with a complete proposal that covered all of the concerns we've talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to just, in fairness to the applicant, they did undertake public input pieces of it, and they're not obligated to account for them all. They're here. In fact, I don't know our current rules require them to do that kind of level of consultation, period. So I don't want to besmirch them too much on this one. I think they're at here. So
I'm going to call point of order. I didn't besmirch them. I commented on the process.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. You did not, Councillor Green. But I just want to make clear. I think they followed an appropriate process or a allowed process to this point. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. In sending this back to staff, I guess we've got 4 things. I agree with all of those. An additional sort of comment or depth about site access limitations. I think it's not just site access limitations. I think that the site layout as it is currently does not have much ease to it or breathing room. And I think about that in terms of the kind of amenity that it brings to the people and the families who come to live on it. And I think it is missing those characteristics of I hear the architects saying this form, this is kind of a typical development. It's not typical for Oak Bay because we don't have townhouses, but it is actually quite tight. It's and I would like to see that also addressed. I don't think it's it's kind of hard and linear and very tight packed. And I do agree that kind of reflecting on Councillor Appleton's point that he asked the question, how does this actually, what's being proposed, relate to the direction we're going with our OCP? But I do think that this site is very unique in that it abuts the golf course and it's large. So I think that there are arguments to be made that it's an exceptional site, and therefore acceptable to come up with proposals to do something with more housing on it than just the 4 units that would be allowed. I'm not sure it makes the best opportunity of its co-location with the golf course, which is a beautiful piece of open space. So I'm not the designer, I can't be the designer, but I just think if I were going to buy one of these townhouses, which we do need townhouses, I would just want a bit more ease and graciousness on the piece of property I'm living on. And I think the fact that it's at 13 at the moment is actually driving some of what we're seeing. And I think that if with, I can't speak to the pro forma either, but I think with certainly with some less number of townhouses, some important improvements could be obtained. I also just want to comment on the issue about height and overshadowing, and I just want to be careful about sending the developer away to kind of try and reduce that. We have examples of that that the previous councils agreed to with respect to the rental property at the corner of St. Patrick and Central, which completely overshadows the single-family home to its north. And that was considered acceptable in exchange for the housing that we got. And it's not that I would want to be the person being overshadowed, but I think as we bring more housing of this density into our neighborhoods, this is going to be a reality because we still have a large stock of single-story homes. And I don't know what you do about that, but I would hate to see the opportunity or reducing these units to 2-bedroom units in order to address that issue, because I think it's a lost opportunity in terms of the amount of access to townhouses in our community. So really my site access limitations and sort of site ease or breathability or spaciousness on the site are the biggest issues for me, and I'm not sure that it needs to go. I'd like to see proposals that actually used a Lansdowne frontage. We haven't had that presented to us at all, and I think that it would be nice to see that, because I'm not sure that it will create the traffic impediments that people seem to be concerned about. It's a busy road, but it's not a hugely busy road. It's not Foul Bay. It's not a lot of other streets in the community. So I think there's some alternatives there that could be explored.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Appleton.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I'll try not to retread and try to be fairly punchy here, but there's been some really good points made here, and I concur with these 3 points that staff have introduced as far as a referral to things that are critical to look at. I also concur with the idea of exploring a Lansdowne frontage. I don't think that that's been established as to why that isn't there, and I think we need to clearly and intentionally look at a Lansdowne access. I think that that's totally valid. Inclusion of accessible or adaptable features, as per Councillor Green's comment, I think that's really valid as well. We need to be looking forward to who might be purchasing these properties, and I have always said, and I know Council is also demonstrated their support for these being, the types of places you want to create, the kinds of places that people can stay in their community, they can downsize from their homes, and folks can stay in their community and stay in Oak Bay. So I think anything we can do to further that is always of benefit. And in terms of reducing the scale of change, to my earlier comments, I think it's really to the developer to respond to the feedback that they have sought from the community and contextualize this with the ongoing OCP review. One of the points that Councillor Braithwaite made is a really, really good one, saying townhouses are being presented to the new OCP as a transitional housing form. I concur. And we are presenting that as a particular housing form to provide transitions in density in the community as we introduce that density. So that's important. We want people to buy in and be engaged and be excited and interested in the townhouse housing form. People have indicated that they want to see that. So then it is to the developer to contextualize why this site in this context in a different, basically in a different physical location with different access to amenities than what is proposed otherwise in the OCP. In terms of how you reduce the scale of change, that I think is the challenge for the developer to respond to. I think that there's a number of points here as far as the access, traffic circulation, scale and massing, and those types of things that that can be addressed here. I don't think that it is a lost cause. I think that there's work that can be done here, but it very clearly needs to respond to what the community is in the process of communicating to us and what we're in the process of responding to as part of the official community plan review. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite, do you want to add anything to your earlier comments?
No, the only thing I would say is I would agree with the comments that Councillor Green made as far as inputs and the time between. I'll use the example of what was in our package. On page 85 in our package, from the report from Marking, in the conclusion it said, the project team remains committed to working collaboratively with the community to address issues and explore solutions that balance the dire need for diverse housing in Oak Bay along with community interests and provincially mandated housing targets. And that was written on February 18th, 2025. And so that has been a long time between then and now. And so I do question why that has not really been done yet. And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you. And I will be voting against the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Smart?
Yeah, thank you. I too, with the site access, would like to see an option off of Lansdowne with regards to the reducing the scale of change. I think it's really addressing the specifics of the site and a lot of the community feedback. I mean, there's the most important thing being context with the community, and if that's on one level, it may be as simple as reducing a couple of units to provide more of a buffer, but it could also, there's some opportunities that, like you look even particularly at just how spectacular that view is to the golf course, and having the actual design really relate to some of the features of the site, so that it just feels like it fits into the neighborhood. I'd love to see one fully accessible townhouse unit, and I heard today that might be possible, and just a more substantial community amenity contribution that seems to fit with basically the ability to have this much density. Thanks.
Anything you wish to add, Councillor Patterson?
Well, I won't be supporting the motion. However, as I said right at the onset, I do want to see something that is orientated to Lansdowne. Lansdowne is not quite the busy transit corridor that some people would say, and the speed limit has been reduced along it to 40 kilometers an hour, so it's already been reduced, and certainly traffic exiting onto Lansdowne can still turn north or south on Henderson should they choose to do that. But I agree with everything that has been said around here. I think though that, and my reason for not wanting to send it back to staff is it seems like there's so much change required in this that it's more up, in my opinion, it's more the role of the applicant to take it back, having listened, rework it all, because these aren't minor changes. This could potentially be a total rework, and I'm not certain as to how much a local government staff should be working with the developer to try and make it better, as opposed to the developer looking at what has been done in our OCP and the values the community has, what the values that are being expressed for the new OCP tell us, and they are the supposed experts at this, so I rely on them to come up with it rather than our staff guiding the process. And I don't want to see our staff guide the process, so I won't support it, but those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'm hoping some of this is some help. I do, I mean, my general reaction to it is that it feels the wrong massing and pieces to it. I'm not going to lie. I do say, though, I don't think this is, I think the ask is correct that it's a unique piece of property facing the golf course, facing the street, that it could have a different treatment than the standard R4 lot or R3 lot or whatever it is. So I don't have any objection to that. I think it's really important that we look at innovative pieces. I appreciated the comments made around that using the space of the golf course and the street. I did note, it seemed like the warm details, some of the little veranda pieces and stuff, were all facing inwards and not facing the community. And I think some of those little touches that sort of connect the building to the community are hugely valuable. And I still think there's something in the scale of the front face, where it could be 3 stories, but I think its interface with the street could be softer, but that's whatever that looks like. I do appreciate that's probably going to have less units or whatever that looks like if that ends up in that place, but that's sort of where I come off that. It's interesting. I hear the concerns of the Woodburn access. I guess it depends. I think with the 13 units and the way it's laid out, I do struggle with it. I don't personally don't think it's outrageous to have it off of Woodburn if it was structured in a way that made sense. I think it could be done. There's pros and cons to that, but obviously there's nice if the streetscape is green as opposed to driveways, and so I get that. Where else did I have in my notes here? Yeah, I think that's probably the feedback I would get. It does feel it doesn't feel the right massing for the site right now for me, but I don't want it to not have an opportunity to kind of go and think about it. It may well end up being something very different, but I wanted this opportunity to kind of go through a bit more of a detailed feedback portion of it, so I'm supportive of this going back with staff. I think that's all the comments. Anything else people have thought of that they wish to add into this process? Appreciate this is still going to be a 4-3 vote the other way, but I think it's important to hear from everybody at the table as to what they would like to, what their concerns are and what their hopes are. I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? And any opposed? We have Councillor Patterson, Councillor Braithwaite, and Councillor Green opposed. I think that concludes the business of this item. We don't have much else on the agenda package. Is there any new business or notices of motion? Okay, then I just need a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thanks for the patience of everybody in the audience as we work through all of that. And we'll see what comes next.